This one goes out to all my indecisive people out there. Are you wanting to get your degree abroad in Europe, but are struggling to figure out and to pinpoint which country is the best fit for you? Well, then stay tuned because we made this video just for you. Our team at Beyond the States has been helping American students move abroad to get their degrees in Europe since 2015. So we have our fair share of expertise in terms of helping students choose which country is the best fit for them. Choosing a new country that you're going to live in for the next 2 to 3 years at least can feel overwhelming, especially if you've never visited that country before or are not too familiar with it. And in Europe, there are so many countries to choose from, which is great, but also can be really overwhelming. So we are going to break things down for you into categories that you should be considering in terms of evaluating which country is the best fit for you in terms of moving to Europe to get your degree abroad. And those categories are language of instruction, weather and climate, lifestyle and cultural norms, cost of living, safety, and post-grad work opportunities. Now, the first category, as we mentioned, is language of instruction. This, of course, is going to be a huge factor, especially when it comes to applying to programs. You want to make sure that they are taught in English so that you would qualify for them unless you speak a second language and are willing to do your entire program in a foreign language. And especially at a bachelor's level, there may be fewer programs that are taught in English than at a master's level. The first example that comes to mind is Germany, a super popular option for international students. There are not a lot of English taught bachelor's programs specifically in Germany. However, there are loads of English taught master's programs. So this is something you're going to want to take into consideration when you're looking at different countries if there are programs that are English taught that you qualify for. For example, in the UK and Ireland, there's obviously not going to be any language barrier there. So there are going to be tons of options for you both at a bachelor's and at a master's level. As far as countries in Europe that offer a larger range in bachelor's programs, you can look into the Netherlands, France, the Czech Republic, Poland. Whereas if you're looking into a master's level, you're going to see a lot more variety when it comes to programs in different countries. So your options are going to open up a lot more. But of course, you can find English taught bachelor's programs in other countries. And if you really want to do a deep dive into this, then I highly recommend that you use our comprehensive database at Beyond the States. Our database is unlike anything else. We have over 11,000 English taught bachelor's and master's programs compiled on there. And you can narrow down your search criteria by country or city. And with this, you won't have to go down a rabbit hole on the internet trying to figure out if a specific bachelor's program is taught in English or if only courses of that program are taught in English. It can be really confusing to navigate this stuff. So with our database, you won't have to do any second guessing. Everything that is on our site is guaranteed to be completely taught in English and accessible to Americans. Now, the second category that I put on our list, I specifically put in second place because I think it is so important right behind language of instruction is climate and weather. Weather and climate is really a make or break for some people. And while some may thrive in a rainy or colder weather climate, others may really suffer. So this is something that I implore you to take into consideration when it comes to choosing the country you'd like to move to for the next 2 to 3 years at least. For weather and climate, we can split Europe up into 4 regions. The first region is Northern Europe, and climate is really characterized by cold winters, short days, and mild summers. This is something you really want to think about, especially for winter months when sunset might be at 2 p.m. And countries that fall under this umbrella are Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Denmark. So if you're the type of person who loves to stay in and read a cozy book while it's raining or snowing, then maybe one of these countries would be a great fit for you. Now, next we have Western Europe. The climate is mild, cloudy, and with frequent rain. And these are countries such as the UK, Ireland, the Netherlands, and Belgium. So it's kind of like a tamed down version of Northern Europe, not going to be as extreme, but you are going to have some great weather, especially in the fall and winter months. However, you are also going to have a lot of vibrant cultural scenes indoors. For example, in the UK and Ireland, we know that pub culture is a big thing. However, in these countries, especially in the Netherlands or Belgium, this doesn't stop people from going outside. In fact, you see so many people riding their bikes in the Netherlands. So if you enjoy some of the cozy elements of this weather, but also don't mind riding your bike through the rain, then this may be a region for you to consider. Next, we have Central Europe, and this is characterized by more distinct seasons. So the classic fall, winter, spring, and summer. And these are countries such as Germany, Austria, Poland, and the Czech Republic. So in these countries, you have cold winters that can be pretty dreary and depressing. I've lived in Germany and I know just how gray and gloomy the winters can be. Now, take this with a grain of salt. I'm from Southern California, so Germany just wasn't for me when it comes to weather and climate. However, in the summer in these countries, like I said, I can speak from experience living in Germany, the summers are super warm and people are out all the time just tanning at the park or by the river, which is really nice. And I definitely get the appeal, especially I have so many friends from the East Coast who cannot imagine living somewhere that doesn't have like specific seasons. So I feel like Central Europe would be a great fit for people who want to experience distinct seasons. Now that leads us lastly to Southern Europe. Southern Europe, of course, is characterized by hot, sunny summers and mild winters. I particularly, as I mentioned, did not jive well with Germany, but I am now currently living in Italy and I thrive in Southern Europe. And besides Italy, other countries that fit into this criteria are Spain, Portugal, and Greece. And here, like I mentioned, it's a warm Mediterranean climate, especially where I live in Rome. The summers get hot. For example, this summer, it didn't cool down until probably like the first or second week of October, which is kind of crazy. And even in the winter, if it gets a little chilly, you still have a ton of sunlight, which I love. So if you're someone who struggles with seasonal depression, or if you just grew up in a sunny, warmer environment, like for me, Southern California, then a Mediterranean country may be the best fit for you. Now, the third category, I feel like really transitions well from the second category because it really takes into account your personality and factors in some of your personal preferences, and that is lifestyle and cultural norms. Now, this is something I really think you should deep dive into when it comes to each country. Maybe watch some TikTok videos about people's experiences in these countries, some of their culture shock, to see if that would jive well with your personality and values, because some of these cultural norms may feel really frustrating to you, but others you may thrive in, and that's okay. It's just really dependent on your personality, so let's dive into it. And this is really skimming the surface in terms of cultural norms, so once again, I highly recommend you also do some deeper research into this yourself. Now, for example, in Nordic countries, people are known as being very equality driven, also very punctual when it comes to time, and also very reserved socially. So if you're somebody who's super outgoing and feels like you need to be in an environment where people are also really outgoing, then these countries may not be the best fit for you. One value that's really important in these countries as well is personal space. There's even like a famous meme of people waiting at a bus stop in a Nordic country, and you can see everybody is like 6 feet apart, and this is before COVID even. And if you're willing to respect these cultural norms and adapt, or if you feel like you're going to just fit right in perfectly, then that's great. These are just things to keep in mind, of course. As I said, it might not be for everybody. Central Europe, especially Germany and Austria, can be similar to this as well, just a bit tamer. People are a bit more reserved in these countries. You're not going to be making small talk, for example, at the grocery store. However, there is a lot of diversity in these countries, which is great. There's also tons of international students, which makes it a great international environment so that you can easily make friends. Even if it may be difficult for you to make friends with the locals, maybe they're a bit more reserved, maybe it takes some time to crack the shell, you will still have plenty of opportunities to make friends with internationals, as there are so many in Germany and Austria. And I feel like the same goes for Western Europe in general as well, also the Netherlands and Belgium. Eastern Europe also can be a bit more reserved. People tend to be more traditional and pragmatic. And lastly, Southern Europe. Southern Europe is really the opposite from Central and Northern Europe, as it is just a lot more relaxed. Whereas countries like Germany are super organized to a T and people are very much rule followers to their core, it tends to be the opposite in countries like Italy and Greece. Timeliness isn't as much of a virtue in these countries. People may run a bit later, but people are also super social and talkative. You will find that you make a lot more small talk in these countries as opposed to in countries like Germany or Austria. So if this sounds like you, if you're a social person or you're trying to get out of your bubble a bit and be more social and learn the language, then one of these countries may be a great fit for you. Now, our fourth category we're going to dive into is cost of living, specifically when it comes to tuition for programs in these countries. Of course, budget is something very important when considering which country you want to move to, if it's going to be sustainable for you in the long run. However, I do want to preference that even though there is a range in tuition and cost of living prices in these countries, still all of these countries are going to be much more affordable, even the highest tuition fees, than going to a school in the US. So first are low-cost options. This is going to be Germany, Austria, the Czech Republic, Poland, and Hungary. Now, in these countries, your tuition fee is going to range from free, yes, I said free, and we'll get into that, to 4,000 euros per year. Now, Germany and Austria are going to be some of your cheapest options in this tier. Austria, for example, is going to be around 720 euros per semester for tuition for international students, which is incredibly cheap. And then Germany, at some universities, your tuition is completely free, or you have to pay what is called a semester contribution fee, which isn't technically tuition, but just, as I mentioned, a contribution fee. For me, for example, this semester contribution fee was less than $400 per semester. And the majority of that fee went directly back into my pockets and directly benefited me. It allowed me to attend free sports classes at my university, so I didn't have to pay for a gym membership. And it also included a semester membership for the public transport. So my travel was essentially paid for, and I could take trams and buses and trains all across the region. So if you want to study for as cheap as possible, but also get a solid education, then I highly recommend considering some of these countries in the lower tier. Next, we have our mid-range tier, which is going to run from approximately 2,000 euros to 8,000 euros per year. And these are countries such as France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, and Greece. And lifestyle in these countries is also going to be a lot more affordable, especially in more mid-sized or smaller cities. And countries especially like France, Spain, and Italy are especially popular with international students. So this is a great option for you that's still at an affordable price point. Now, next we have high cost schools. This is going to be in the 8,000 euro to 20,000 euro price range. These are countries such as the Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, and the Nordic countries. There are tons of English taught options in these countries, obviously, Ireland, of course. However, the cost of living is also going to be a bit higher, especially in countries such as the Netherlands or Ireland, where they're experiencing housing crises. So, your cost of living expenses, your housing and tuition is going to be a bit higher as opposed to the other countries and the other tiers. However, if that is something you're willing to compromise on because there's a lot of other qualities of these countries that you might like or that you might find attractive, then I highly recommend going for it because there are a lot of amazing programs you can find that are in English. Now, next, we have your very high cost programs. These countries are going to be a bit more on the bougie side. Your tuition is going to run you anywhere from 15,000 euros per year to 30,000 euros per year. And these countries would include the UK and Switzerland. Now, while these countries are expensive, if you are prepared to spend a lot for your education and want to go to a top tier university that's world renowned, such as Oxford, for example, in the UK, then you might want to consider some of these options. Now, my biggest tip for you when evaluating these countries and subsequently schools is to check public universities first, because many EU schools charge minimal tuition fees, even for international students, as opposed to private schools. So start out looking at public schools. If you're not finding options that fit for what you want to study or English taught options in the fields of study that you're looking for, then try a private school next. Then you can move on to checking private schools because, of course, even though private schools are more expensive, you are going to find a higher volume of English taught bachelor's and master's programs. Now, the fifth thing to consider, I just want to touch on briefly, and that is safety. Now, for many people, this isn't going to be a huge concern because Europe is generally one of the safest regions globally. If you check the Global Peace Index, for example, or EU safety stats, you can see that most EU nations rank within the world's top 30 safest countries. However, this is going to be something you're going to want to consider, especially if you are a minority, especially if you are part of the LGBTQ plus community, because there are some countries in Europe that have a pretty conservative government at the moment that might not be the safest places for LGBTQ plus students to set up a home. If you're an LGBTQ plus student in particular, two countries I would really steer clear of are Hungary and Poland. While these countries have amazing programs and the affordability factor obviously is there, if you are an LGBTQ plus student in particular, there are a lot of anti-LGBTQ plus policies in place. If you fall into this camp, then these countries are probably not going to be the best fit for you and wouldn't be countries that we would match you with at Beyond the States as an LGBTQ plus student. So this is just something to keep in mind as far as safety goes. Now, last but not least, the sixth factor you're going to want to consider when choosing a country in Europe is post-grad work opportunities. Now, most universities in Europe offer post-grad job hunting visas for international students who completed a bachelor's or master's program in Europe. And the length of these job searching visas really depends. Some countries, such as Germany, give you 18 months to search for a job on these visas. Others, such as France, Sweden, Spain, Italy, Portugal, or Poland, give you 12 months. And the UK and Ireland actually give you 2 years to search for a job on one of these visas. So this is something you want to consider when it comes to post-grad work opportunities, especially in some of these economies where it may take a little bit longer to find a job, especially in English. Countries such as Germany, Ireland, the Netherlands, or the UK have really strong job markets currently, even if you're looking for a job that is primarily English speaking. However, there are other countries such as Spain, Italy, or Portugal that may have limited opportunities when it comes to English speaking jobs. So these are things to keep in mind depending on what job field you're going into and whether or not you are going to be able to speak the language at the end of your study program at a working level. Now, I know this might have been a lot to digest, but I hope this helped you narrow down at least 3 countries that you may be a contender to study in and that may be a great fit for you. Now, if you need more hands-on one-on-one help in order to narrow down what schools and countries may be a great fit for you, then I highly suggest checking out the link in our bio. You can actually book a free 15-minute strategy call with our team at Beyond the States in order to figure out what path and what services we offer that may help you on your journey. So make sure to check that out and don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any of our content. We post tons of videos about living abroad and finding study programs abroad. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video. Ciao for now.